So I would like to introduce Michelle Picararo. I first met Michelle when she worked for the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. Her background is marketing, and she joined the Plymouth 400 team in spring of 2014, and she has begun really developing the whole concept and what will happen in Plymouth in the year 2020. I kind of looked up our towns. We don't have anybody 400 until about, I guess it's 2034 or 36, something like that. So you all can start planning. She knows international marketing, she knows domestic marketing, and she has some great ideas for what will bring the Plymouth 400 to its culmination in the final year. But up until then, they're planning many events, and I had seen her presentation some months ago and just thought you'd all find it interesting because it is a real part of all of our history. So, Michelle.
Thank you, Anne, for that lovely introduction, and thank you all for having me in this beautiful part of the Commonwealth. I don't get up here a lot, but it is, as I'm sure you don't get down to where we are a lot, but when we explore our own backyard, I think that's when we find the greatest joy, because we are all a part of this beautiful Commonwealth. So I want to commend the college staff on their highly authentic costumes. I don't know where they all are, but I love the pilgrim costumes. I feel very at home. And then I also wanted to comment on the apple cider, which was absolutely delicious. So just some of the things that make us different from one another in the state. We add cranberry juice to our apple cider. So Ocean Spray maybe hasn't made it up here, but that's something that we cherish, is our cranberry industry down there. And then I also wanted to comment on the Rick Burns documentary. I've seen 3 screenings of that documentary now, and it's going to surprise you. It is not your average, everyday pilgrim native story. So I highly recommend it. I think it's Tuesday at 7 or 8, and then it's on again Thursday night, right at 9 o'clock. So I highly recommend seeing that. It will be worthwhile for you to see that. So as I said, I'm honored to have the opportunity to be here in Franklin County, and specifically in Greenfield, to address you regarding Plymouth 400, the commemoration of the voyage of the Mayflower, the founding of Plymouth Colony, and the relationship between the Wampanoag people and the English colonists we now know as the Pilgrims. There isn't anyone in this country who's been to 3rd grade or who has sat around a Thanksgiving table on the 3rd Thursday of November who doesn't know or think they know something about this time in history. Before I get into the plans and goals of the commemoration, which are certain to rival the bicentennial of 1976, for those of you who remember that, I want to tell you about an experience I recently had in Plymouth, England. I traveled there in September with Anita Walker, who's the director of the Massachusetts Cultural Council, to participate in an important benchmark for this 400th anniversary. The Plymouth and Devon area have an organization like ours called Mayflower 400. The leaders from Mayflower 400 attracted the attention of the U.S. ambassador to the UK, a Massachusetts native born in Lincoln, Massachusetts. He was invited to Plymouth, UK to talk about the 400th anniversary plans that they are making, and I made sure that we were there to be present representing the United States. After being shown all of their plans for economic development projects that will be related to this, and seeing the passion around commemorating this event. Now remember, a ship full of 102 passengers and 35 crew left England from Plymouth, England. They are looking at this as a major milestone commemoration for their part of England. Our English ambassador, Ambassador Matthew Barzin, stated what his biggest fear was, and his biggest fear was He said, I fear that there is a lack of support for this important commemoration in the United States, that our federal and state governments have not matched the enthusiasm of the British government in planning and executing this commemoration. The federal government in England has committed £5 million, that's $7.7 million, to infrastructure and tourism product development for 2020 in that southwest corner. And the city of Plymouth, a city of about 300,000, has acquired £10 million, that's $15.5 million, through their local coffers, specifically for the cultural events for the anniversary. Just take that in for a minute. So, again, this does not include the millions being invested in economic development projects with a 2020 deadline over there. All driven by the anniversary of the embarkation of a ship whose 102 passengers fought for over a decade to be free of British oppression. I raise this point because from a global perspective, the voyage of Mayflower is seen as possibly the single most significant ocean voyage of any ship in history. The history of the founding of Plymouth Colony was the beginning of an unstoppable movement that culminated in the creation of one of the greatest world powers ever conceived, the United States of America. And the relationship between the Wampanoag people and the colonists was just the beginning of an indigenous colonial struggle that continues to inform our current events. This is not about Plymouth alone, but we do have the distinction of being the oldest permanent sustaining community in America. It's not even really about Plymouth Colony. It's about the Commonwealth and the role that it has had in the making of America. And globally, it's a story that the world has a great curiosity for. With a far less known history, Virginia saw great success in the economic impact of Jamestown 400 in 2007 through tourism, education, and business development. The Commonwealth of Virginia saw an increase of $1.2 billion in sales, creating more than 20,600 jobs for the state, providing $22 million in tax revenue, $6.4 million for local governments, and earning more than 12 billion media impressions promoting Virginia as a premier tourism destination. They mounted 17 days of programming that were inclusive of educational and economically productive. And yet, throughout their promotion of America's 400th, they were constantly compared to Plymouth, Massachusetts. In 2004, the Virginia Tourism Corporation conducted a survey of 1,000 households to determine how aware Americans were of the history of Jamestown. Only 25% of respondents knew that Jamestown was the first permanent, not sustaining, but the first permanent colony. Can you guess what over 70% of people said? Plymouth. I don't know what the other 5% of people said, but it wasn't that. Orlando. Yeah. In fact, their insider tagline for 2007 was, "Let's get out from under the rock." And I know that because we hired the company that did Jamestown's 400th. So I got that from the horse's mouth. Virginia is planning another commemoration, 400 years, in 2019. In 2019, it will highlight the first ship of slaves to arrive in Virginia, the first ship of single women, there's one, to arrive in Jamestown, the first meeting of the Burgesses, and this is where we all should be a little bit outraged, the first recorded Thanksgiving, 2019. So there is a bit of a rivalry, and there is also a little bit of competition going on there. But as the state of Massachusetts, I think we need to challenge the state of Virginia. We do know that Thanksgiving is attributed to the colonists that came here and the Wampanoag people, even if that is a bit mythologized and legendary. Our plans are bigger. We have slated a full year of events and programs for 2020, and additionally commemorating the 400th anniversary of the first Thanksgiving, which is 2021. We have rallied other Massachusetts communities involved in this story from Cape Cod to Salem, and we continue to explore shared history throughout the state So if you know of any pilgrims that moved up here, please let me know. As I said, I'm a marketer, not a historian, but we are looking for all of the footsteps of the pilgrims and the Wampanoag and Native people in general throughout Massachusetts. Massachusetts is the only state that can boast 400th anniversaries in historically significant places from 2020 through 2030, including Quincy, Salem, and Boston, and Plymouth, of course, to begin. We've begun working with these cities and towns to promote a concept called Massachusetts 400, a way to cross-promote and sustain tourism and business impacts of these commemorations over the next 15 years. We are making inroads and garnering the support of the administration. We also have the support of the Massachusetts Cultural Council statewide, and we have Governor Baker, who has filed an executive order for the formation of a state commission regarding these 400th anniversaries. But we are not asking the government to pay the big price tag. Corporate sponsorship and grants will make up 65% of our funding, but most of that will come 2.5 years from now. In order to get there, we need state support, without which it will be difficult to get our federal legislators on board. We need resources to be sure that the return on this investment maximizes its returns to the people of the Commonwealth. But mostly, we need to garner the passion and enthusiasm to commemorate what Massachusetts owns, quite possibly the most significant immigration story the world has ever known, in just 400 short years in the making. So what I'm going to do next is tell you what the plans are for this commemoration. We spent a lot of time with this branding. A lot of people have different ideas of what that ship with the native person standing in front of it really means. It really just means that the native person is standing on the shore watching the Mayflower sail in. So, America, this is our messaging. So bear with me. I want you to know what the scope of this messaging entails. America is poised for an anniversary of national and international significance, the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower voyage and the founding of Plymouth Colony. The Plymouth 400 will highlight the cultural contributions and American traditions that began with the interaction of the Wampanoag and English peoples, a story that significantly shaped the building of America. Would you agree with that? I think so. So what's our objective? Our objective as an organization is to create a commemoration that's historically accurate and culturally inclusive while enhancing the brand of the destination and the Commonwealth. It's pretty simple. And why should we do it? Well, this was a long exercise that took place in 2011 with the board of directors, way before I was in my post there. Why do it? Because if you don't have a good why, then don't do it. So these are the 4 reasons why. Tourism and economic development value will be great. National and international recognition for the Commonwealth. Cultural, educational, and civic engagement, and there will be a lot of that throughout the next 4 years. And the legacies of this commemoration, which you'll find out about in a few minutes. We have several themes. So the plan is to take these themes and embody them in events and programs. Our themes are innovation, exploration, Thanksgiving, religious freedom, self-governance, and immigration. Now, some of those seem pretty self-explanatory, but others might need a little explanation. So innovation. In this time in our history, we really feel that this needs to be a technologically driven commemoration. So we are working to make sure that social media and media in general is a big part of this. So through apps, through driving tours and walking tours, through information that comes out through blogs, etc. Innovation will be very, very important, especially for the educational pieces, which I'll talk about in a little while. Exploration kind of goes without saying, just commemorating all of the explorers that came before the Pilgrims. Thanksgiving. So, of course, it's a theme, but what we're doing with that theme is we're bringing to light the idea of giving thanks and giving back. how do we give back to our communities, our country, and our world? So Thanksgiving, in this context with a small t, means that we're commemorating things like historic preservation, volunteerism, philanthropy, all of the ways that we can give back to our communities. And so that's going to be another big part of this commemoration. Religious freedom goes without saying. That is why the Pilgrims, or a third of the people on the ship, came here. Not all of them. Self-governance, the Mayflower Compact, quite possibly one of the most important documents in history, not just American history, but in history, based upon the Magna Carta, the precursor to our country's Constitution. Thank you. So that in and of itself is a very important thing. And then one thing that I didn't mention here, but Bradford, Governor Bradford left an amazing account of this experiment, if you will. He left a book that we still have that's this thick, that sits underneath, never seen to the light of day, underneath the State House. It's called Of Plymouth Plantation. If we want to get that book circulating, just as they did with the Magna Carta just last year. We want to see that travel around the state. We want it to be seen. It's an act of Congress to get that book out from underneath the State House, and the state librarian is everyone's extremely protective of it. But if you've never seen it, it is quite something. It actually makes the Magna Carta look rather small because it's one piece of paper. This is a whole book in his handwriting. And one of the reasons that the Pilgrims, that Rick Burns actually did this documentary, was because of that book. So it's largely about William Bradford. And then the story of immigration. So all of the colonies that were founded prior to Plymouth were founded for commerce, for business reasons, were founded by shiploads of men who came here to take back what they could for sale. This was the only ship that brought families. And so when we look at why the Pilgrims came here, they came here for a better life. Not everybody sees themselves in the Pilgrim Wampanoag story, but everybody sees themselves in an immigration story, with the exception of Native Americans. So as a marketer, to me, that's a hook that we really need to have. Immigration, as we also know, has a pretty bad name right now. So maybe this is another way that we can remind people that we wouldn't all be here without this very important building block for our country. So this is a snapshot. I just wanted to show you this. I quoted some numbers earlier from Jamestown. I took Plymouth County, the numbers for Plymouth County alone. Now this is just 23 towns of Plymouth County. Right now, we see about 2.3 million visitors annually, and with about a $600 million visitor spend, and we have about 3,700 jobs. We took the numbers, the percentage increase from Jamestown, and we took the numbers from the two best years in tourism here in the Commonwealth, which were 2000 and 2001, before September 11th. The two best years, recorded years in tourism. We took those numbers and we crunched them, and we came up with these, what we feel are pretty conservative, and I know you're looking at that 7 million number and going, what? Pretty conservative numbers, that Plymouth County will see an estimated 7 million visitors. That is between November of 2019 and 2021. Visitor spend will be around $2.2 billion just for Plymouth County. Now imagine if, the Cape is a huge part of this story. All of the counties in Massachusetts can be a part of this story and can increase their tourism dollars. Job creation at around 10,000 just for Plymouth County. So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we're working with the state and federal government. Right now, we are waiting for the announcement of the State Commission. The State Commission is being formed. They're doing resumes and background checks. at this very moment, and that we expect an announcement of that soon. And in order to form a federal commission, we really need the state to have this commission and to be on board. We have received earmarks over time. Over the last 5 years, we've received about $750,000 spread out over those 5 years for Plymouth 400 to launch this commemoration. But that is, and that's been helpful. We are looking for federal funding, so getting the federal government on board is extremely important. We're working with our Congressman, Bill Keating, right now, but we would really love for you to be advocates for us as well with your congressman, because, again, it will benefit the entire Commonwealth. We work with legislators right now, as I mentioned, to secure state funding, and we are looking at federal funding. And when you go to the federal government, it's pockets. You know, you have to kind of look around and see what's available. But we are doing a lot of meetings in Washington, D.C. this coming year. We plan to do an event in Washington, or a series of events, to build awareness for this commemoration for Massachusetts. One of the things that was easier for Virginia was that that D.C. sits in the lap of Virginia, and there is a lot of connectivity down there with the federal government that we, because of our removed location, we don't have. So we really have to make a concerted effort to make sure we're down there doing these things, especially in light of 2019 and the 400th anniversary of those things I mentioned. We are also working with other nations, as I mentioned. We work very closely with our counterparts in the UK, who are also planning a commemoration, and we will be doing some joint efforts on that, joint cruise and airline partnerships, where people can go over there, follow the pilgrim footsteps, come over here, and finish the story. The Wampanoag tribes of Mashpee and Aquinnah, and the Herring Pond tribe, which is not federally recognized but is a traditional tribe in Plymouth, are, for the first time in history, they are all, I don't want to say all on board because that would be incorrect, but there is a group of Wampanoag people who understand that in past commemorations, the Wampanoag story has either been silent by their own choice, because why would they commemorate 400 years of the coming of white people? It has been misrepresented. In other words, because they were silent, people dressed as Native people, other Native people from other lands came, other parts of the country came and posed as Wampanoag people, or has been censored. And the censorship came in 1970 when a gentleman named Frank James was asked by the General Society of Mayflower Descendants to speak at one of their events for the 350th anniversary, and he agreed, and he wrote a speech. If you Google Frank James censored speech, and I suggest you do, you'll read a very eloquently written, beautifully stated account of how Frank James felt at the time and how his people had been treated over time. Not insulting, not difficult, but parts of it difficult to read. But back in 1970, the Mayflower Society descendants wanted no part of the speech that he wrote and told him, absolutely not, you have to change it. So rather than change it, he went to the top of Coles Hill in Plymouth, called a bunch of media, brought Native people from across the country to protest, and started the first official National Day of Mourning. The National Day of Mourning is now still commemorated across America by Native people. We want to move the needle on this dialogue. We want to make sure that the Native voice is heard, is told by Native people. So we are working hard on that, and I will tell you about that in a minute. We do pre-commemoration events. I'm not going to dwell too long on them, but it's to raise awareness and engagement. so that people can come and start to hear about the 400th and talk about it. Our signature events and programs are what is going to happen in 2020. Our story, A Wampanoag, 400 Years of Wampanoag History, is an exhibit that debuted in 2014. We told the story, the Wampanoag people, told the story of Squanto. Squanto was kidnapped with 20 other young men from Patuxet, which is now Plymouth, sold into slavery in Europe. They kind of got far-flung across Europe. Squanto ended up in the home of a wealthy man as a curiosity, learned English ways, learned the language, and then made his way back here to find that his entire village had been wiped out by plague. He came back in 2019. Most people don't know how Squanto came out of the woods speaking English. They just know that's where it all began. So we wanted to tell that story. We wanted the Native people to tell that story. We just added a new panel. Every year this will grow with new information on Native history and culture, on Wampanoag history and culture specifically. The Wampanoags, their message that they want to get out to the world with this commemoration is, we are still here. They are still here, a small tribe of about 4,000 people, but now federally recognized, just recently got their land into trust done in Taunton and Mashpee, so very important part of the story. We also have a traveling exhibit that will go around the country, starting at late 2016, called Plymouth 1620 2020, talks about the intersection of these two cultures, but it also talks about this area and how it grew over time. That will be an ambassador for this commemoration. We already have that booked at the Gerald Ford Museum in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we are looking at other museums and public spaces. Signature events and programs, I know I'm running low on time here, so I'm going to go through these quickly. We have the opening ceremony, November 2019, where we'll be inviting heads of state, presidents, royalty, etc., to attend. The sunrise commemoration will take place on the Cape Cod National Seashore, most likely, and that will be faith leaders from around the world and spiritual leaders from around the world convening here to commemorate religious freedom. Wampanoag Days will be a celebration of Wampanoag arts, culture, and heritage in a powwow-like setting. The Embarkation Festival will be embody that whole idea of immigration. It will be a multicultural festival, 2 to 3 days. That will happen in Plymouth. Plymouth Rocks is an educational webcast, for lack of a better technical term right now. We know it's going to change for 2020. But we will have students be able to interact from their classrooms with the programming and with each other in a multi-day experience. The 2020 International Youth Summit is for older high school and college students, and that brings students from around the world here to go to the authentic places, to research in the authentic places, and then to convene at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute in Boston to write a compact for the future. And finally, in 2021, we are going to illuminate Thanksgiving. Illuminate is actually one of our events right now. It's happening tomorrow, in fact. It is the idea of giving back to the world, to your community. And we are giving an award called the One Small Candle Award, based on Bradford's famous quote, "Just as one small candle may light 1,000, so the light here kindled has shone unto many." But we're commemorating one person, that one small candle. This year it's Esther Earl. If you don't know who Esther Earl is, she was the young woman who was the inspiration for the book and movie The Fault in Our Stars. Her parents live here in Massachusetts, and they are going to be our keynote speakers. She will be receiving the award posthumously. She passed away in 2010 at the age of 16, but touched millions of lives through the internet with her incredible spirit and lust for life. It never got her down. And I talked about the Mass 400. We are working very hard on making sure that this becomes a platform for economic development for the state of Massachusetts for the next 15 years, starting now through Boston in 2030, and goodness knows what happens after that, but hopefully, it can continue to roll. So that's kind of in a nutshell the planning and execution of this. It's an American story and a national legacy and an international curiosity. So thank you very much for your time. I don't know if we have time for questions, but thank you.